So how are you today, Seretta? It's good seeing you.
Always good to be seen and not viewed, Kevy Kev. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, this is July 25th.
Yes.
And YouTube is doing a life in the day of the pandemic. And I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, we all church-going folk. And I want to ask you a little bit about what church is going to look like going forward in the midst of the pandemic.
Well, first off, let me thank you for even inviting me to participate in this particular, in answering some of these questions during this particular time, challenging time that we live in. And most of us are baptized, born-again baptized believers. The church, you know, during this season of COVID, they talk about how, oh, the church is closed, or when is the church going to open? The church never closed because we are the church. So what happens in the buildings have closed, and since the buildings have closed, we've had to come up with ways where we could still be able to communicate the Word of God. That even as much as times continue to change throughout history, throughout the generations, over thousands of years, the one thing that remains the same is the Word of God. So when we look at this pandemic, we should not panic. We should remember who's large and in charge. And we should understand that now we'll be doing, quote unquote, church differently. And so how are we going to do church differently? Well, we're doing it through the technology, through the other platforms, this social media. We're doing it long distance, social distance, if you will. But we're still able, because of the technology, to reach and teach and touch electronically.
So, what is the hamlet of Roosevelt looking now in the midst of the pandemic? What disparities have emerged since we've been through this virus?
Well, first off, when we talk about this great 1 square mile, we talk about Roosevelt had the distinction of being the largest concentration of people of African ancestry in 1 square mile. When I was a little girl, that was the designation, because we were the largest concentration of black folk in 1 square mile. And producing so much talent. You had John Mackey come out of here.
Yes.
Emily Moore, a tennis phenom we all know and love, Miss Moore, came from here. You know, I mean, she mixed and mingled with some of the best and the greatest. That's how Arthur Ashe and that whole crew came out. You mentioned PE, of course. You mentioned Eddie and Steve White, God bless the dead, Charlie Murphy, but let's not forget Dr. J.
That's right.
Julius Irving.
That's right.
Who was a powerhouse. Then you had the Reverend Praythea Wynn.
Right.
She came, as a matter of fact, she was president of the school board when I was a senior in high school representing the Roosevelt Student Association. So when you talk about the talent that comes from 1 square mile, it has been phenomenal, and there are still geniuses coming out every day.
Yes.
And there have been generations of doctors, lawyers, teachers, of town workers, of, you know, just different, all walks of life.
All walks of life,
yeah,
exactly.
Right here. And, you know, the civil rights struggle did not pass Roosevelt. We need to keep in mind that this side of town, we've always lived here on the south side,
right,
southeast side,
right,
you know. But the reality is the brilliance that has come out of here consistently has been a blessing. And there are those who come back to serve. You know, there are those who never left our base.
Right.
In terms of operating. We may operate across the country, around the world, but this is still the base. So COVID-19, with the high concentration of now black and brown people,
right,
we find that our communities are hit hard. There are services that have become available. There are church organizations that have stepped up their game. For example, the other day, they had Minority Affairs did a food distribution, because Island Harvest and other entities are doing these things, you know, during the midst of this. So
right.
One thing we can certainly say that we see is that we see our folk obeying the mandate in terms of the mask, the social distancing, and doing what it is we're supposed to do. On that hand, it's great. The school systems here, as every place else, have been hit extremely hard. The primary concern is that children cannot go back into facilities that not just are unsafe, but until we get a handle. You know, thank God for our governor. I often tease him, our gangster governor. But I'm glad he attacked this thing the way he did. He did his job.
Yes.
In other words, and that's not to take anything away from our governor, but he did his job. He did what he was elected to do.
Absolutely.
Every day above ground is a good day. And if we see our neighbors in need, we help. That's the way Roosevelt has always been. And even though people come, people go, there's always going to be that base and that base of support for the richness of the history that's right here in Roosevelt. You know, so everybody's challenge. You know, it's funny, Kevin. And you talk about, oh, in the era of COVID-19. Well, I always start now, no matter what platform I'm on, I'll get it in there that in this age of Corona, we no longer will think of, when we hear Corona, blue skies, sand, a beach, blue water, and a bottled beverage with lime, but rather, we'll think of this virus that in the midst of the virus, the other virus that's been with us for generations, was unveiled, unmasked, and undeniable to folk who have been in denial for so long. And now, and I'm talking about, of course, racism. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois said the great question of the 20th century will be that of the color line. It wasn't addressed then. We're in the 21st century now. And it is being, I tell you, it's being addressed. I am so proud, even in the midst of this virus, this epidemic, pandemic, of our young people, of our brothers and sisters who have defined themselves finally as members of the human race. That is our commonality, of the mothers over in Portland that put the wall up, of the brothers and sisters marching, and I could not be prouder of my sisters, because going back to the paradigm shift, we find that in our major metropolitan areas, such as Atlanta, where the Honorable Keisha Lance Bottoms is leading down there in the midst of madness, of folk trying to be destructive, sisters standing strong and tall, and had to deal with the virus, but never stopped in terms of her functioning as the mayor of Atlanta.
That's right. That's right.
So be encouraged, beloved, because this too shall pass. And what we have to do, thank God for families being able to have dinner together again.
That's right.
That we're not on our devices while we...
That's right.
Okay, that we actually have to have conversation.
That's right.
That our teachers haven't all been crazy.
That's right.
Because now you home with Kwame and Kareem and Deb and everybody. So it's a time where we can grow. It's a time of opportunity. It's a shift where the nonsense that used to go is no more.
That's right.
So what do we do in this shift? What do? We shift with it.
That's right.
The only thing that hasn't changed is God.
That's right.
And the Word. So that's my word of encouragement to folk. Go to Philippians, that 4th chapter is rich. It will guide you. But concentrate on that 6th and 7th verse. Thank you, Kevin Can.
Seretta, thank you so very much for your time. I truly appreciate it.
God bless you, beloved.